Mr. William Binney at the end. He's a 30-year veteran of the National Security Agency, as you hopefully know by now, having watched the film. Top mathematician, cryptologist, and the creator of the program Thin Thread. And, Mr. Ray McGovern, you've maybe caught on RT and other Democracy Now! And all these other important channels. The mainstream media doesn't like the fact a long-time CIA level officer who became, he was in charge of preparing daily security briefings for the presidents, vice presidents, all the way from Reagan through George H.W. Bush. And Mrs. Diane Roark, Republican staffer on the House Intelligence Committee from 1985 to 2002. And obviously you saw her as well in the documentary. Really, her story is not fully known. I think there's a lot more to get into. I guess I have to start with Mr. Binney over here, because we have to know what is going on down at CIA headquarters as far as what you can divulge to us of how this conversation went with Mr. Pompeo, and basically what, just give us a little bit of a sense of the briefing that you were able to give.
Well, first of all, I was kind of surprised to get a call from him to go in to see him. He invited me in to see him, and I of all people, I've been calling them all criminals for years, so why would they invite me in to talk? Well, it turns out that as I got in there, the first thing that Director Pompeo said to me, he said, the president said that if I wanted to learn some facts about Russiagate, that he should talk to me. And so I got called in. So I went in there, and he said, well, what do you know? And I said, well, from the BIPS group, we had about 6 of us together were doing that. And it wasn't just me, it was Ray was involved, and Kirk Wiebe, and Skip Holden, and several others. And some network experts, they would understand the network, how it works and everything. So we were basically technical people. We were looking at all the data that Guccifer 2 put out there on the web, and looking at the timestamps of the data and everything, so we could look at how it was tapped off on the 5th of July of 2016. And we said, well, gee, they're taking down 16 gigabits of data. This is what I was telling Director Pompeo. They're taking down 16 gigabits of data in 87 seconds. That can't be handled by the web. That can't be transferred to Europe across the network by the web. It had to be a local download. It was really pretty simple. And people said, no, you can get that rate, across the Atlantic. You said, okay, let's try it. So we tried it. I had some senior hackers in Europe that I knew, and I said, you want to help us do this? And we had some help here in the U.S. Like one of our guys put a gigabit of data out there and said, here, you go pull it. So we pulled it from Amsterdam and even in the UK, and the best we got was 12 megabytes, that's bytes, not bits, per second, which is roughly 1/4 the capacity necessary to transfer the data in that time frame. And we couldn't get it any faster. And we tried it in various other places. We even went to Belgrade and Albania, and gave up because the network was so slow. It was slower the further east you went. So getting into Russia was just been impossible. But at any rate, we couldn't even, from a data center to a data center in the UK, we couldn't get that data across the net that fast. So we knew that proved it was a local download. But it happened to be exactly at the right speed for a thumb drive download. So that kind of said to us, well, it's local. I mean, where it went after the local download, we don't know. But we do know that the download was local. Guccifer 2 was saying it was a hack from, across the Atlantic. That's not possible. So that questions, who is Guccifer 2?
And so at the end of your summation or your briefing, what was their response like?
He asked me to talk to the FBI and NSA and see if I could find out if they could tell. First of all, I told him right up front that the NSA and the FBI, they're all lying to you. I mean, because when they come out and said, it was FBI, CIA, and NSA who said in their report that we have high confidence. Well, to me, that immediately meant they're lying. I mean, they have nothing. And the reason I know this is because of all the taps that NSA has on the fibers, and they have embedded into them traceroute programs. Well, traceroute allows you to follow the path of packets wherever they go. And they've got hundreds of these in the US and around the world. So, if any packet in the US goes anywhere, they know where it goes. So that also told me it didn't go across the net. That was the first thing back in August of 2016 that I said they were lying, And in fact, they are. When you read the FBI report about the hack, there isn't any evidence there. And if you look at their 14-page paper, on the 13th page, it says, you shouldn't interpret our inferences as having any basis of fact to say this is certainly what happened, you know? And they're basically saying right up front, we don't have any evidence. Well, that's why they've never told you they've had any evidence, because they don't. It's all a fabrication.
I think their main evidence was the Russia Today, the news channel RT, the fact that we were not pro-Hillary. I think that was the most certain evidence they had that we must be influencing the election.
And now they have to register as a foreign agent, right?
Yes. Well,
and isn't that nice for the First Amendment? We can't stand the First Amendment. I mean, we have to censor people.
It's okay. I can't wait till the other networks have to register as foreign agents too, because we know that they get their money from other countries like Saudi Arabia and other places. So here we go.
What about the BBC? Huh?
Exactly, the BBC, our imperial counterparts. I want to go to Ray now to talk for a second. You know, what's interesting is because you were focusing on analyzing the Soviet policy towards Vietnam, I got into it with Jim Carrey on Twitter yesterday because he was saying, in '68, the Soviets or the Russians were backing our enemy in '68, and now they're putting their puppet into power in 2016. And I said, man, how ignorant is that statement? Jim Carrey, I love you, but really, Vietnam was not our enemy. We have to wake up. Come on, are we really still talking about Vietnam as an enemy of the American people? Like, this is 50 years. This is like retrograde thinking, isn't it? So the idea, though, that he represents, in a sense, this consensus perception, which is that there is a Russian phobia that continues. There is this Russian bear that continues since the Cold War. And during the Cold War, they were fighting us on every front, and here they are again working against us. Is this really a deep state propaganda that we're looking at, and basically a war that's perpetuated by the deep state against Trump?
Well, thanks, Sean. Some of you may have noticed I'm having a little trouble here. Maybe it's because I'm a New Yorker, and it's also because I invited some 9/11 widows to be here, and I don't see them anymore. And so I want to apologize to all of you New Yorkers who were personally touched by what happened and by the malfeasance, not misfeasance, of the people we used to work with. And suffice it to say right now, I'll recover in a while. But I think we're talking about good Americans, plural, here. And I just feel very honored to be with Diane as well as with Bill.
So you don't want to...
Can I turn it over to Diane right now and come back to me?
Come back to that issue? Yeah, absolutely. So, speaking of 9/11, I mean, we have to address this. Certainly, the documentary explores the issue of what Thin Thread was capable of assessing in terms of what is known. But there's many unknowns, and we found out recently with 28 pages that FBI had an informant in San Diego that essentially, there were ties to Saudi intelligence that are becoming more and more clear. We have, obviously the FBI memos from Rowley and others who were basically trying to inform people of, operations. We have plenty of literature that existed of the hypothesis of, terror operating in the U.S., flying planes into buildings in other countries with Bojinka. But you could even take Tom Clancy's book, Executive Orders, from '96, where he hypothesized, and Clancy is known for relationships with the intelligence agencies, hypothesizing an attack on the Capitol in his book. And Jack Ryan became president, and then Iran launched Ebola right after the attack, just like the anthrax that happened right after our 9/11. So I think that there are many issues about 9/11 that people are not satisfied with the investigation, the 9/11 Commission report. What can you say as far as your assessment of what is being withheld continuously from the U.S., not only involving Saudi, but even domestic agencies actively preventing the discovery of the terrorist plot?
Well, I believe it's disgusting. I believe Congress has abandoned its duty to oversee the agencies and to make sure they conform to the law. In fact, the intelligence committees have become the worst purveyors of the scare theories, and we want more. We want more domestic surveillance. We want more of everything. And the leadership then channels all of the legislation, the proposed legislation, through the intelligence committees, where they basically put the kibosh on anything that is very much of a real change. And they also pretty much, it seems, take the administration proposals and just put them through. And I believe I was the first. I retired in April of 2002, but I did do the markup for the intelligence authorization bill that year. And I put in some of the language that NSA was at fault for the attack. And it really bothered me later. Well, it turns out I was surprised that my committee let that go through. But then later, the staff director went up to NSA and made a speech and retracted it. But I was most disgusted with the 9/11 Commission report and all the others that, NSA didn't take any hits at all. There was almost nothing said about NSA. And it was CIA and the FBI that took the greatest criticism. But I think what happened was they pulled classification on them again, just like they did on the members. They said, we'll brief you into this thing, but you can't ever say one word about it before they've ever been briefed. They agree to these terms, and then then the commission is told that they can't publish anything about domestic surveillance. So what good is a commission, really, when it comes down to it?
And Diane, we can, to continue with you, it's interesting to me when it comes to the nature of cyber war, because that's the new phase we're in. Today, shadow brokers. Is that it? Shadow brokers. This new news item hit that shadow brokers is like a new anonymous type of group that's divulging basically details about NSA agents and operations and all kinds of analysis. And of course, it says, well, it's probably a Russian group, or an inside job, or some combination of the two. That's literally the analysis that's given to you in the mainstream media by the intelligence community. But we're in this place where we don't know. As citizens, we are completely blind to understanding what cyber war is. I mean, it's difficult enough to analyze a real attack, a physical attack, and people becoming more and more savvy to false flags, to understanding the nature of operations. They don't just believe, just because the FBI says the lone nut did it, I'm going to believe that story. But when it comes to cyber, it's as though we really have this sort of the wool pulled over our eyes, and we say, well, how can I analyze that? How can I know if it's Russia, China, North Korea, an inside job, our own agencies, some private corporation? I mean, we're basically in this void of understanding it. And I think, with your experience with the intelligence community and the committees, how can we analyze the nature of cyber war from an intelligence perspective? I want Diane can give it, and then Bill too.
I think the first thing you have to understand is that we were at the forefront of cyber war, and we went on the offense, and there's a little problem with that. And the problem is that we rely on computers more than anybody else in the world almost. I mean, we were right up there at the very top, especially at that time we were. So it's like people throwing stones when they live in glass houses. It's exactly what it's like. And the second thing I want to say is that in the cyber warfare area, the US government has always favored offense much more than defense. And that means when they are implanting in encryption schemes, for instance, so-called backdoors, so that they can, US systems are used all over the world, not just in the US, and so they can go and exploit it for intelligence, for information. So it's an offensive use of it. But what happens is when they do that, the defense is burdened. Basically, we're leaving U.S. citizens and corporations open to attack so that they can collect information on other people. And I think it's a big conflict of interest. NSA traditionally has had both an offensive and defensive role. In fact, they were supposed to be securing U.S. government systems, especially for the Defense Department. And I can speak to this personally because I'll tell you how much U.S. systems have been protected. You may remember that the Office of Personnel Management was hacked grievously, and half of all intelligence persons, all cleared persons, including at very high clearance levels, had their security applications stolen. And so not only is this an issue of identity theft, but they think they were stolen by the Chinese. Well, if the Office of Personnel Management isn't even encrypting their databases with this kind of information, and the intelligence community isn't insisting that it be encrypted, what is their right to tell U.S. businesses what they should and shouldn't be doing? And they had been trying to take over the cyber defense. And the emperor has no clothes, basically. And my own information was stolen twice. And this is everything about you. It's your social security numbers, your date of birth, your whole educational history, your whole work history, your whole family. I mean, it's perfect for assuming another identity. So now we have a massive CI problem because half of all intelligence employees going back for years and years had their stuff stolen. But anyway, the bottom line is, I think we have to get real encryption as a first step, and we can't have the government be objecting to that. And there's been a big fight with a lot of the IT firms about this because they've been wanting them to build a backdoor into their stuff and letting them in. And you can't build a backdoor that only the U.S. government can get into, or that only Google or somebody can get into. It's impossible. Somebody else can find it. So, this whole effort by the FBI and the Department of Justice in particular to put the kibosh on really effective encryption has to be confronted. And the other thing is, the second thing is that we need the IT community to focus in particular on really usable safeguards for the ordinary person who does not know a whole lot about IT, but also for businesses, because they've been taken to the cleaners so many times.
Bill, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I was going to comment on the the whole business of the attack part of this, which is cyber attack. That NSA has been working on it for a little over 30 years. Okay, and so all the stuff that CIA has, we help them out. Here's all these attacks we already know about and have been capitalizing on, but haven't been giving anybody protection. So we left everybody in the world vulnerable. And instead of fixing them, we let them be so we could look in and see what everybody's doing. Well, it gets to the relationship between the two parts of NSA. One is the attack side, which is where I came from. The other was the defensive side, the Information Assurance Directorate. And, one time I solved a little system that was kind of, they also did something similar for our people. So I went over there and explained how I solved the thing that the other guys are doing. And I said, no, is this something similar to you do? And they said, we can't tell you. And I'm in the same agency, okay? And I just told them how our side worked, or their side, the bad guy's side. And they're doing the same kind of design, and they wouldn't even tell me even the design was the same. So they wouldn't even talk to me. So I said, okay, I went away. And that's what happens. The people in the attack side, in the computer exploitation area, didn't talk to them. So if they tell them what the weaknesses are, these people might fix them. And if they fix them, the window will close for the attack side. And so they left everybody vulnerable. And that's why everybody's getting attacked, because the weaknesses are still there, and people eventually find them. I mean, this is not rocket science. They have no monopoly on the smart people in the world. I mean, there's lots of smart people out there. So they're going to find these weaknesses too. It's only a matter of time. And now with the exposure of Vault 7 out of CIA, which is a copy of the material from NSA that was leaked by, I think Martin was the guy that they arrested anyway. That's thousands and thousands. The WannaCry attack was one of them, and it shut down things in a certain area. It shut down a number of hospitals in the UK and all. Well, get ready for a really rough ride. Unless they fix these problems, you've got thousands of other attacks that people have available in the network, and anybody can use them. Just because they were invented in NSA and passed the CIA, does that mean either one of them did it? No. That means you have to, every time there's an attack, you have to trace the packets as to where they eventually went, because everybody's got access to these things now. So this was all a responsibility of the attack side, not talking to the defense side, inside NSA, and also not telling the companies that build these products, you have a problem, and they don't share that. So everybody's left vulnerable. And when in fact they should have, and every time, by the way, this is I call the second swindle. The first swindle of all of us was based on you have to give up privacy for security. That was a lie from the beginning. And they knew that because Thin Thread showed that and demonstrated that. But they refused to do that because it didn't produce enough money for them. The second swindle was the cybersecurity. Every time there's an attack that they knew about, by the way, and didn't fix, every time they did that, they'd come up and say, we need more money for cybersecurity. Well, why don't you fix the things you know that are wrong, and then maybe we'll have some cybersecurity. Well, the third one now is with this Russiagate. They're trying to create a Cold War again, which is going to cost us all about $2 trillion, and that's what they're after. They're after this money. So, this is all a circular thing about this military-industrial intelligence complex wanting to feed on everybody and put everybody in debt. We're at 20 trillion now in debt, so, get ready for a continuing ride and people swindling you.
Absolutely. And so to elaborate on the Russiagate, I mean, yeah, Ray, as far as who are we looking at? What's your analysis of the deep state? Because it's pretty clear. I think anyone who reads the newspaper can pretty quickly get a sense that, all right, Trump is Trump is with the Russians, and so everyone has to attack basically, Russia, Trump, anything to do with his policy, his politics. And you have to wonder, okay, if that media represents that component of deep state thinking, then what is it really about? Is it purely money, or is there an ideology, or is there something else at work?
Oh, I am a little weary because I stayed up much of the night writing a piece for Consortium News, which is on the web now, which is titled "Trump Confronts Deep State Full Bore." He did that in Vietnam. He named names of the previous intelligence directors, and I talk a good bit about that in that article. I want to pick up on just one thing about the Chinese hack. Amazing, okay? Amazing. And I think it's pretty confirmed that we do know the Chinese did it. As a matter of fact, we know the building in Beijing from which they did it, right, Bill? Did you tell me that?
Shanghai.
Where? It's not Beijing. That's the only city I know in China. Where is it? Shenyang?
Yeah, Shanghai.
Okay, Shanghai. All right. So, why do I mention that? Well, how about the Russian hack? Oh, do we know the building? Do we know the building? No, we don't know the building. Do we know anything?
We don't know anything.
In the Bronx, we would say we don't know diddly about the Russian hack, right? Because you think maybe there wasn't one, right? Okay. Now, I want to say
I can't find it.
A couple things about the incredible luck that I've had. In my career, I had a lot of good jobs, briefing presidents, but one that was really good because I had a community role. I was a Deputy National Intelligence Officer for Western Europe in the 70s when all hell broke loose in Western Europe. Now, I mention that because there were times, this was a community role, okay? That meant that I worked for the director under his hat as head of the whole intelligence community. So I knew the folks in NSA. I didn't know many people in Congress, but I could call on real experts to give me straight answers, okay? The best experts around, like Bill, okay? And here I find myself with veteran intelligence professionals for sanity, with about 30 of the realist experts in the world on various endeavors, okay? Now, when the hacking came up, that was Bill. How do you get any better than Bill or Kirk, or Ed Loomis you saw there. He and Bill were both technical directors of various parts of NSA. So what I'm saying is that we have a little cottage industry intelligence community here in Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. We're not very popular with people like General Hayden, but I'll just give you a little, we used to say in the Bronx, I'll give you a for instance, okay? Here's a for instance, okay? Now, I go on RT whenever they ask me. I'm proud that I go on RT. Why? Because unlike all the other people that ask me interviews, and they're decreasing in numbers, RT never asks me for a pre-interview interview. Okay? BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN, they all want to know what you're going to say. And sometimes the BBC said, well, thank you very much, Mr. McGovern, we don't have time for that. Okay? So, what happened here was on the 31st of March, I get a call from RT at 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, I know that they're not open till about 10 o'clock, you know, so I said, what's going on? Oh, we got a really interesting thing here. We've got a Vault 7 release, and I said, what is it? And they said, well, they sent me the link. I said, oh my God, it's okay. Can you come in? I said, sure. Can you be here by 9? Now, rush hour traffic in Washington? I said, well, I could drive down the carpool lane, you know? So, you know, for the country, you make sacrifices, right? So there I am driving down the carpool lane. I had read the article very briefly, but I said, now, okay, Ray, what are you going to say about this? Hey, Bill, are you up yet? Okay, there's this Vault 7 tool called Marble, and it allows the CIA, which has a great big cyber offensive unit now, mostly peopled by NSA NICs, okay? It allows them to hack into a computer system and obfuscate. That's a pricey word we use in the CIA. Obfuscate who hacked in and leave little traces like, they worked in 5 languages: Chinese, Korean, Persian, Arabic, and Cyrillic. My friends say Russian. Yeah, Russian. So you can hack in, disguise who hacked in, and leave a little thing. I said, wow, you know, Bill, this sounds like it might be relevant. You know, we all-source analysts like to connect dots, you know, and, you know, hacking in and leaving whoa, you know. I said, can you tell me about it? He says, yeah, Ray, it's real. He says, you tell him that I know. I was there when they started it, about 15, even more years, and it was NSA, CIA, working this thing out together. And I said, well, what else can I say? He says, well, tell him that it has 700 million lines of code, right? So I say, oh, is that a lot, Bill? He said, yeah, Ray, look, Ray, 1 line of code costs $25. Can you do multiplication? Yeah, I can do both. Wow. So there I go into RT. I'm all prepared, and I tell them, like I'm an expert on this thing, exactly what this is all about. Now, Vault 7 was advertised by Julian Assange on the 7th of March this year as having more data in it, more revelations than all the stuff that Edward Snowden brought out into Hong Kong. That's a lot of stuff, folks, okay? They can take control of your car, make it go 100 miles an hour. They can monitor what you say in your bedroom through use of a Sanyo TV, and now they can hack in and leave telltale signs, okay? So what I'm saying here is that Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity is really blessed by the expertise we have in things like NSA and military matters and diplomatic matters and all kinds of other all-source analysts. And right now, we are fighting a very unpopular battle because nobody, and I mean, well, maybe, okay, nobody I know wants to be seen as somebody who says something good about Trump, okay? Who wants to look like they're defending that clown in the White House? Well, Well, this doesn't matter. Somebody asked Bill the other day who he voted for. Completely inappropriate question for an intelligence professional. People don't understand. That is completely irrelevant. We follow the information where it is. We tell it like it is, and we may be the only shop left, the only skunk works, if that's what that does that, and is blessed by the kind of expertise that kind of comes to us when people get so ticked off that they retire or they just want to tell the truth. So look at what we do. It's on consortiumnews.com. There's a special tab up there that says VIPS memos, and we just did our 50th, and that was the one that hit pay dirt, because never in my life did I expect that the President of the United States would call the head of the CIA and say, hey, I got this memo from Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, and I want you to go talk to the guy who wrote it, Bill Binney. So, it's...
Ray is not taking... Ray herds us like cattle, He keeps us in line. Hey?
Well, I try to. It's not easy.
Well, Consortium News is a wonderful newspaper, and Robert Perry runs it, great journalist. Couple more questions, then we'll open up to audience. Bill, just to get back to this issue, because beyond the cyber war issue, there's this cyber surveillance. And when you left NSA, you said NSA was becoming the new Stasi organization or agency. There's a confusion I think people have, and really it's amazing to me that even with Snowden's revelations, the film Snowden came out, it wasn't really necessarily watched by mainstream people. There's a lack of awareness and understanding of what NSA actually is able to surveil. They have terms like metadata and things like this that get thrown around and obscures the conversation. So what is it that NSA can actually access and do with our information as U.S. citizens?
Well, they can do things like use it against the Tea Party or the Occupy group or Elliot Spitzer to get rid of him because he was going after the bankers for defrauding people. They could do that. They can use it against anybody they want to, anybody who opposes the position of the government.
You mean as far as accessing actual phone conversations, actual texts,
Conversations,
actual email information?
emails, everything. It's all being stored. I mean, they had the Utah facility, a 1 million square foot facility that they're storing. My estimate was about 5 zettabytes of data. That was based on the Cisco company's estimate of. See, they sold them the routers to route data into that center, and they were estimating that by 2015 they would be getting 966 exabytes a year into that center. That's it's about a zettabyte.
It's a lot of bytes.
It's a lot of bytes, yeah. And they were thinking about yottabytes, and then when they come with quantum computing, maybe you have to go beyond that. I said, well, okay, the next one should be a bunch of bytes or a lot of bytes or something like that. Something humorous, But no, they're capturing everything. I mean, that's why Tim Clementi, the former FBI agent, after the bombing in Boston, came on CNN and he said, we're asking the wife of one of the Tsarnaev brothers what they discussed in their phone call before the bombing, and if she didn't tell them, they had ways of getting back at it. Well, the ways they have getting back at it is it's digitized, it's stored. Not just in Utah. There's another 600,000 foot facility in San Antonio, and there's other places like Denver and Fort Meade. They've got computer buildings and supercomputers and all that stuff there. But one of the things I wanted to point out about this hacking that has been missed here by the lamestream media, because they're not thinking, it's just regurgitating a line. The president basically came out and said he believes Putin. Now, you have to think about that for a minute. If he believes Putin, what has his intelligence agencies told him? They haven't told him anything convincing. That means they have no facts. So here they're expecting him to believe something when, in fact, it's not true. And, in fact, we had evidence to the contrary. That's why the president sent Director Pompeo to talk to me. Well, I mean, that tells you right away that the intelligence community is lying to the president. Now, this is very dangerous. This is the kind of situation you get with a slam dunk with weapons of mass destruction, and you go kill a couple 100,000 people.
You didn't tell Pompeo that, did you?
Yes, I did. And he said, and
I told you, plain spoken.
I didn't, I also told him, he said, well, this data is classified, you can't do that. I said, wait a minute. John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy, released the photographs, the classified photographs of the missiles in Cuba back when the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on. That was to say, here's the evidence. It's clear they've got the missiles there, you know. And then President Reagan, when the Russians shot down the Korean airline, he said, here, and he released the Japanese recordings of the air-to-ground traffic control, the fighters, the Russian fighters, when they ordered them to shoot down the plane. And he released that in the UN. That's classified too. So I said, there's no excuse for this. If they're going to call this an act of war, release the evidence. Classification is not relevant here.
Yeah, add something to it.
Okay. I wanted to address the issue of what kind of data they are collecting. And it is far, far more, far broader than anybody realizes. It's not just classified data, which they classified because they've collected it by secretive means. And as Bill said, that's everything. That's, you know, everything you do on your computer, your cell phone, your geopositioning, a whole bunch of things like that. Your telephones and you know, your landlines, everything. But it goes well beyond that. And I found out before I left, well, actually after I left in July of 2002, that they were actually collecting commercial databases at that time with private, very private data about US citizens. And their collection program has just kept increasing. I was shocked when I saw Snowden's data. It was so bad before, and it had exponentially increased. And it's not just US citizens that are at risk. We are most at risk because the government that is collecting this, as well as the UK, has so much power over us. We have this big Leviathan state, and you depend on them. You depend on it for Medicare, Medicaid, whatever, for everything. Every single citizen has multiple points of pressure. But beyond these private, you know, these private databases, and some of them appear to be collected by NSA when they go over the wires, but some of the, or over the, I should say, the fiber optic lines, but some of them are collected and can be collected at any time through the business records provision. The business records provision, everybody thinks was, you know, was kind of limited to like AT&T and the IT companies and the telcos. Well, that's not true. They can go to any business and demand that they turn over their records. Or they can collect them as they're going on over the wires. And as I said, some of this is very, very sensitive information. Like if they can collect, earlier it was mentioned credit cards. Every time you use a credit card, where you use it, when you used it, that kind of thing. Your financial stuff, your credit rating, a whole, I mean, it's limitless. It's absolutely limitless. And then in December of 2012, it was revealed by Julia Angwin on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and nobody paid any attention to it, but it was revealed that all the federal government databases on its citizens are also being collected and put together with all this classified information. So every time you deal with a government agency, you have to realize that that very well might be collected, and it is all centralized at the Counterterrorism Center at the CIA. And this is another thing. People say, well, is NSA protecting this? NSA is now just a small part of the problem because they give whole databases to FBI, as Bill indicated before, and everything goes to our foreign intelligence agency. This domestic data is all going to CIA, where this Counterterrorism Center is located. But it is anything that the CTC asks for the Counterterrorism Center, that agency has to provide it. And it was considered a major change in the government's relationship with its citizens. So now they have dossiers on everybody that reveals across the board everything about you. I don't know if the IRS documents are there, but anything they want, they can get. Medical information, whatever.
It's fascinating. I mean, we'll continue the conversation with the audience, but I just want to end with this remark, basically, before we go to the audience, which is, In 2001, there was a conversation going on about privacy, if you recall. It was because Echelon was being discussed, which was basically the first blanket vacuum that was, used by the Five Eyes, the Australia, New Zealand, US, UK, Canada service, basically this information empire sharing of information. And because people were aware Echelon was absorbing all these phone calls and emails and other records, there was a conversation of, well, what are they vacuuming into Echelon? And obviously the government denied it officially at the time, but it was being discussed at that point. And what's interesting, obviously, with the Snowden revelation is how much GCHQ pops up, which is the British intelligence apparatus, is actually the home of a lot of the programs that we use. But the point is that it's an outsourcing combination of basically international imperialism and intelligence gathering. And obviously it's grown since then. But it's as though because of 9/11 and what occurred, that has basically, if I'm correct, put the nail on the conversation about privacy and about the idea that this is actually invasive. Because really, based on this idea that the war on terror is permanent and justified, we have no more basis of our legal rights as citizens.
Yeah, but I would also add that, and one of the important things is that NSA, with their budget, is never audited by the U.S. government, by law. Same is true with CIA. They aren't audited, and they should be.
No, wait a minute. Congress did, in the Intelligence Authorization Bill at one point, actually several years in a row, requested a DOD audit of NSA. And the DOD came back and said their books were not auditable.
Yeah, that's right. They did do that.
And it
yeah.
remained that way for years.
And they're still not audited.
My
That's the
books.
point. Yeah.
Sounds like my books. Hey, can I just say a quick thing here? Just to give you an idea from a civilian's point of view, after Ed Snowden released all that information, and people like Bill confirmed that, yes, it is everything, Well, it sounded like the East German Stasi. And some of you remember that wonderful film, Das Leben der Anderen, the lives of others, okay? It gives you an idea what the Stasi was like. Well, we contacted at that point Wolfgang Schmidt, who was a colonel in the Stasi. And we said, Wolfgang, what do you say to the people in the United States that say, we don't have anything to hide, we're okay, we're fine? And Wolfgang said, this is incredibly naive. The reason they collect this stuff is to use it against you. The only way you can prevent it from being used against you is to prevent it from being collected in the first place. And that's it, right? And, I see enough people out there with this color hair. All I want to say is, if you want to put your body into it, as some of the rest of us have, you will find out that they may beat you up just a little. They're not going to kill you. But Americans relate to old people getting beat up, all right? Mm-hmm. Now, what I'm saying here is that when I got beat up a couple of times, Hillary Clinton's office, Petraeus' office, they all got flooded with emails and phone calls because Americans don't like old people get beat up. So, why do I mention that? Okay, young people, they have it coming to them. Young people need to watch old people who feel strongly enough to do as I've done. I have to go up to Syracuse on trial at the end of the month for closing down Hancock drone base. But young people need to know that we feel strongly enough to do that if we're inclined. There is something we can do besides being aware. We need to take some action and put our bodies into it, in my view.
All right, we got a huge queue, so let's go ahead with the first question.
Hi, this is on. It reminded me of when Scott Ritter, they said he had child porn on his computer. Do you remember that, when that happened? Scott Ritter, the weapons inspector.
The UN weapons inspector, he was very much opposed to the Iraq War and the build-up to 2003. I remember him going to universities and lecturing, actually, and trying to raise
He was on Amy Goodman, all the
awareness.
shows, and then all of a sudden they said, oh, he had child porn on his computers, how they neutralize people. I've lost about 100 friends in the last year. Do you have any advice on being, my friends think, they either don't know you or they think you work for I say, Bill Binney and Ray McGovern, they say, oh, Julian Assange, Ed Snowden, they worked for Russia. You can't get anybody now, like I'm such an outsider in my group, and you either eliminate these people in your life who just keep calling you a conspiracy theorist, or, it's all comic book. Where do you get all these ideas? When I bring all this information to people, I'm just wondering, how do we bridge that thing where people have this line like this, and all their peer groups in their circle keep them intact in this ideology of that we're all crazy? And how do you do that without eliminating every single friend we have to get this information out? I mean, I asked 50 friends to come today, and luckily I have about 10, but I mean,
yeah, no, basically, yeah. The question being, how do you basically break through?
There.
How do you break through consensus thinking, basically groupthink? And you're the CIA guy. You should tell us. What's the strategy? How do we counter propaganda?
But I mean, as the VIPs, we put out the data we had. We
Nobody
just put it in the. Yeah, well, every time somebody says something different to us, we say, well, "Where's your facts? Here are ours. They're published." Let's have some facts, please, not your opinion. Thank you very much for your opinion. It's like, body parts that other people, everybody has.
There's a Binney axiom about opinions. I think it'll be okay to say this in this setting, yeah?
My axiom.
Yeah, your axiom. Yeah.
I just thought you said it.
Opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one. Sorry about
That's
it.
a quote from Platoon.
Just one more.
Could
just
I
one
add
more thing.
something?
Can I just say one more thing? And is it possible on 9/11 that there were multiple operations like JFK? So if that was going on, and also the nanothermite and everything with the controlled demolition that Richard Gage and all those guys, so that there were multiple operations that were going on that day. The people that knew not to fly, they were informed not to fly on 9/11. The planes going up to Alaska and Canada, the war games that were going on, there were multiple operations that were going on, aside from the information.
Yeah,
the
no.
intelligence agencies.
We'll let Diane talk about what she wants. We're not here to analyze 9/11 because they do. Their expertise is not to analyze the assessment of the building and obviously the larger scope of it. But if Diane wants to comment on the 9/11 Commission and her experience and whatnot.
I would suggest that the way to be most effective is to focus on what everybody can agree about. Not on wars, not on, that's very divisive. But in answer to your original point that you're losing friends, what we have to do is get the right and the left together on this. It's the center that is supporting the current policies. And it is the Tea Party conservatives and the progressive left that is opposing them. And we need to cooperate. We need to cooperate. I mean, everybody criticizes the Congress because they can't cooperate. It's partly because the country is split right down the middle. But if we could get these two groups together we could be really much more powerful.
Next question.
Elliot Greenspan with EIR. I think I can pose an approach towards such cooperation. What I want to ask about is cui bono. Who benefits from this fraudulent narrative which the VIPs have documented? Go back to Iraq. The VIPs were formed in 2003 at the point that Bush, Cheney, Blair launched a war based on lies or failed intelligence. They said Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction. Mueller was running FBI for 12 years, from 2001 through 2013, and Mueller was blocking an investigation by the Joint Congressional Investigative Committee on 9/11. Did Mueller allow a serious investigation of the Saudi role behind 9/11? What happened? Patriot Act, regime change wars, they continue. Now the VIPs put out this memo in the summer, and you guys are to be congratulated by every American patriot for that. Because what you identify is that we have a fraud that's been perpetrated for a year and longer by the Obama intelligence community and sustained by the New York Times, etc., which fraud claims that the Russians meddled in this election. And what's the proof? The so-called hack, and then Christopher Steele's dossier, the sex dossier, and things like that. I would suggest that the entity that meddled was not Russia, as Putin continues to say, and Trump believes him. I would suggest we're talking about the British, GCHQ, Steele, British intelligence, the list goes on and on. We have documented, EIR, people in the audience have the opportunity to pick this up, it's in the back. Robert Mueller is an amoral legal assassin. He will do his job if you let him. And this documents 3 crimes of Mueller. In the 80s, the frame-up of Lyndon LaRouche. I was in front of a Mueller grand jury 15 times back then. LaRouche went to jail as an innocent man for 5 years on a 15-year sentence. My brother-in-law, 10 years on a 77-year sentence. That's Mueller, to prevent LaRouche's SDI and related ideas. I'll finish in a second.
Yeah, what's the question, though?
Secondly, the cover-up of 9/11. And thirdly, the setup of President Trump. Trump effectively sent Binney to see Pompeo, as we've seen, and you had that discussion. What is your sense of the cui bono? Who's benefiting from a huge fraud which the mainstream media and so on continues to perpetrate, which would lead to a situation in which U.S. is at conflict, if not war, with Russia, in which Trump's ability to work with Russia and China on the new Silk Road, global economic progress is the basis to peace, his ability to do that would be knocked out by this McCarthyite witch hunt. I'm afraid too many of the New York Times readers here may believe that stuff. Who benefits from this one?
There's a whole series of people, mainly a lot of companies, contractors, right up front, and then a lot of senior people in these agencies that are getting contracts and getting, as a fallout from the money of all these attacks and like cyber attacks and terrorist attacks, and they keep using that to generate fear in the public and saying we have to do these things and so you get more money. The first thing the French did after the first Paris attack was to say we need another billion euros, another 1,000 analysts, and more data. Well, that just keeps that cycle going, and those are the people who are making it. And when the people in the government agencies retire, they go into these corporations to come back, as we said in the film, to solicit contracts from their home agencies, or the agencies they used to be in, because they have all the contacts, and they do that. And so they're part of the benefits. So, and Congress benefits because in their constituent areas, they get all this contract money coming in. And every time the contractors go to them and say, we need more money to do stuff, they're benefiting in the sense of getting reelected and also having their constituents happy. So it's government, it's all of it. Government contractors, and the government agencies, there are seniors, and everybody's feeding off all of us.
With what you have exposed about the Russia hack story, it seems that it is unavoidable that what is currently happening is that there's an attempt to undermine or even perhaps bring down a lawfully elected president of the United States by a corrupt grouping within our government. Given this seeming inevitable conclusion, it seems that people should realize that whether you like Trump or whether you hate Trump, if you believe in democracy and the rule of law in the United States, then you should stand up and defend Trump from these attacks, which are based on complete lies.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even though Obama got elected, I didn't particularly care for his policies or anything, but I didn't try to subvert him, because if he failed, our whole country fails. That's the point. Trump is our president. If he can't succeed, then our country doesn't succeed. So we're really hurting ourselves by doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have to say that if there aren't enough reasons already quite apparent to get rid of Trump, I have 9 grandchildren. They're not going to have clean air to breathe. They're not going to have clean water to drink. I mean, there are any number of things to be used for the flexible clause in our Constitution, high crimes and misdemeanors, to get rid of Trump in an orderly way, as our founders foresaw when a person acts this way. What I object to is using a lie, that is the cooperation with the Russians or meddling or other like kind of stuff, Because that's, that sets a really bad precedent, because you shouldn't get rid of a president on a lie.
But Ray, it's just like thin thread. The way you want to do it doesn't generate money.
I lost my husband on September 11th, and I was one of the widows that fought for the 9/11 Commission. The first time we really heard about the NSA was the 2 leaks that came out. Tomorrow is 0 hour, and The Match Begins Tomorrow. And those came out via Senator Shelby, from the best of my recollection, and then Cheney went ballistic that those things got released to the public and that everybody heard those leaks. Who actually said that? In other words, who said those words? The match begins tomorrow, and tomorrow is 0 hour.
I think those were emails back and forth between the members of the terrorist groups that were involved. I mean, I think probably the Yemen facility was the relay point.
And why did Cheney go ballistic on Shelby?
If you do something like that, you expose your failings to the public. If you attack somebody for exposing something like that, you make yourself even look worse. Why didn't you know? If you knew, why didn't you say something? If you didn't, why didn't you stop this? All that data was in the NSA databases. They didn't even know they had it.
It didn't feel like that to us. I'm just going to say.
I was really,
I think
being a part of that agency, though, it makes you angry at people who are in charge of there because of what they did. If this program we had would have picked that up as it happened, and would alert everybody simultaneously. There were that was another problem. It didn't allow people to control knowledge and information because the program automatically distributed it, within seconds of it hitting the database. It wasn't a question of having someone being able to stop anything, because they couldn't. That's why they didn't adopt that program. Since we knew Osama bin Laden's Inmarsat phone number, we had the entire worldwide Al-Qaeda network laid out. We knew exactly who was where and who was a part of this network. Okay, and so after 9/11, they decided to act. That's when the CIA went into Afghanistan and they started killing or taking these people out worldwide. And that's the real reason you were all safe for a long time, because they actually removed the entire network worldwide. And it was a very disciplined, and I told Pompeo this, I said it was a very disciplined, focused, targeted approach.
The 9/11 Commission was a cover-up. Governor Kane and Lee Hamilton, 2 years after they did the commission report, and they said, what? We were set up to fail.